She was carrying a mattress down Delancey Street at 4:17 in the afternoon. No dolly, no truck, no one helping. Just a woman gripping a queen-size mattress wrapped in a fitted sheet, dragging it 3 feet at a time, stopping every half block to adjust her hold. Beside her, a girl no older than 6 walked without complaint, carrying a black trash bag in both hands. The bag was almost as big as she was. A black car slowed 2 blocks behind them. The man in the back seat did not tell his driver to stop because of the woman. He told him to stop because of the street sign. He knew that address. He had grown up there. Spencer Booker Voss had been on a call for 43 minutes. A development deal in the Marina District. 14 units. The numbers were clean. The projections were conservative in the way that made investors comfortable and aggressive in the way that made them rich. He had built his career on that balance. He listened to his attorney outline the timeline for closing while watching the city pass through tinted glass that cost more than most people paid in rent for 6 months. The interior of the car smelled like leather and silence. There was a bottle of water in the center console he had not opened. There was a tablet on the seat beside him with 4 contracts queued for signature. The air conditioning held the temperature at exactly 68 degrees regardless of what was happening outside. Spencer had spent 22 years building a life where nothing that happened outside the glass needed to reach him unless he decided it should. He was not looking out the window. He was looking at the tablet. Then he was not. Something had crossed his peripheral vision, the way a disruption crosses a clean spreadsheet. Not large, not dramatic, just wrong enough to pull his attention before his mind could explain why. A woman. Carrying a mattress, alone, tilted at an angle that meant she could not see where she was going. Her body bent under the weight of it, like a tree leaning into wind it had been fighting for too long. Beside her, close enough to touch the edge of the mattress, but not helping because she was too small to help, a child walked with a black trash bag held in both hands. Spencer watched them for 4 seconds. The attorney on the phone was still talking. Spencer was no longer listening. He did not feel pity. He did not feel the impulse to help. What he felt was something closer to recognition, though he could not have named it in that moment. The woman shifted the mattress again. She moved it forward another 3 feet. The child adjusted her grip on the bag without being told, without looking up, without asking anything. Spencer's eyes moved past them, past the mattress, past the child, to the green street sign at the corner half a block ahead, Delancey Street. He read it the way you read a name you have not spoken aloud in years. Not with surprise, with the specific kind of stillness that comes right before a door opens that you thought you had locked permanently. He knew this block. He knew every crack in the pavement of this block, or he had 19 years ago. He knew what was at the end of it. He knew the house number without needing to see it. The attorney asked about the timeline for permits. Spencer did not answer. "Stop the car." The driver looked in the rearview mirror. Spencer had not raised his voice. He had not changed his posture. His face had not moved. But something in the instruction carried a weight the driver had not heard before in the 11 months he had been driving this man. The car stopped. Spencer ended the call without saying goodbye. He placed the tablet face down on the seat. He opened the door. The heat of the afternoon came in all at once, and with it, the sound of a city he had been driving through for years without once slowing down to listen. He stepped out onto a sidewalk he had not stood on since he was 23 years old. The woman with the mattress was still moving. She had not looked back. She had not seen the car stop. She did not know anyone was watching. She was still walking toward the end of the block, toward the house, toward the address he already knew she was going to reach. He did not follow her. Not yet. He just stood on the sidewalk and watched her move toward a place that used to be his. Dorothy Mae Hutchins had been carrying the mattress for 11 blocks. She had started on Fulton Street at 3:45 in the afternoon, with the mattress balanced on her back and her daughter walking beside her. By the 4th block, her arms had stopped shaking, not because the weight had become easier, because her body had stopped registering the complaint. It had moved past the part where muscles protest and entered the part where they simply do what is asked of them because there is no alternative. The mattress was a queen size. It weighed 62 pounds. She weighed 128. She had not eaten since the night before, and that had been half a sleeve of saltine crackers she had split with Amara, because the crackers were the last thing in the cabinet, and Amara had not eaten since lunch at school. The mattress was not heavy. Not in the way furniture is heavy. It was heavy the way the last thing you own is heavy. Because if you set it down and cannot pick it back up, there is nothing after it. No second trip. No storage unit. No one coming back with a truck. This was everything that remained of the life she had built for her daughter, and she was carrying it on her back through the streets of a city that had decided she no longer fit inside it. She stopped at the 7th block, set the mattress down on the sidewalk, leaned against it, breathed. The fitted sheet she had wrapped around it was slipping at the corner. She tucked it back. Her hands were raw at the palms. The right one had a bruise she had gotten 2 hours ago when the mattress caught the edge of a doorframe on the way out of the apartment that was no longer hers. Amara stood beside her. She did not ask if they were almost there. She did not ask why they were walking. She did not ask where they were going. She held the black trash bag with both hands and waited for her mother to pick the mattress up again. She was 6 years old. She had moved 4 times in 3 years. She had learned what it looked like when her mother was deciding how much further she could go. She had learned not to interrupt that calculation. She had learned that her job in these moments was to be small and quiet and ready to walk when walking resumed. That is not the behavior of a 6-year-old. That is the behavior of someone who has been taught by repetition that stability is not something the world guarantees. Dorothy did not know when Amara had learned it. She only knew it had happened sometime between the 2nd apartment and the 3rd, and that noticing it was one of the things she did not allow herself to think about during the day. She thought about it at night, after Amara was asleep, in the dark. That was when she let the things she could not carry during the day arrive. She picked the mattress up again. A black car had stopped somewhere behind her. She did not turn around. A door had opened. She did not look. She had stopped looking at stopped cars 3 moves ago. Looking meant hoping. Hoping meant expecting. Expecting meant building something inside yourself that would collapse when the car drove away, and she could not afford any more collapses. She kept walking. Delancey Street was 4 blocks ahead. Then 3. Then 2. She counted them the way she counted everything now. In distance remaining. In wait still possible. In hours before dark. 4712 Delancey Street. Spencer read the number on the house before Dorothy reached it. He did not need to read it. He had known the number since he was 4 years old. It had been his first address. The first place his feet had learned what a floor felt like. The first place he had understood that the space between walls could be warm. He was standing 60 feet behind her. She had not seen him. She was still moving the mattress, still stopping and starting, still not looking behind her. The child was still walking beside her with the bag. Spencer was not looking at the woman anymore. He was looking at the house. It was still standing. That was the first thing that registered. The front steps were concrete cracked down the center, the same crack that had been there when he was 12. The porch railing was gone on the left side. The windows on the 2nd floor were boarded from the inside, with plywood that had warped and darkened with weather. The paint on the front door had faded past any identifiable color, into the gray-brown of wood that had stopped being maintained and had started simply enduring. But it was standing. He had not been back in 19 years. He had not driven down this street, had not looked it up online, had not asked anyone about it. He had purchased the property records 7 years ago through his company's database as part of a routine portfolio review of the neighborhood, and had seen that the house was still titled in his mother's name, taxes unpaid, for 6 years, listed by the city as a distressed property eligible for tax lien auction. He had closed the file. He had not opened it again. He had told himself that was a financial decision. A property in that condition was not worth the renovation cost relative to the neighborhood's projected appreciation. That was the language he had used. The clean, defensible language of assessment and return. It was not a financial decision. It was the decision of a man who could not open a door without seeing his mother on the other side of it, and who had decided that not opening the door was easier than seeing the empty room behind it. The woman was at the front steps now. She set the mattress down on the sidewalk. She looked at the door. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key. not a house key. A padlock key. The city had placed a lock on the front door when the house went into the tax lien system. She had bought the house at auction 5 weeks ago. She had the padlock key and a deed and nothing else. Spencer watched her put the key in the lock. He watched her turn it. He watched the door open. She did not know whose house she had bought. She did not know who had painted the walls inside, or planted the window boxes, or sat on the porch every Sunday night for 13 years. She did not know that the man standing 60 feet behind her had slept in the upstairs bedroom until he was 18 and had not come back since. She picked up the mattress one more time. She carried it through the front door. The child followed. The door stayed open behind them. Spencer did not move. He stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at the open door of his mother's house and did not go in. 72 hours before she carried that mattress down Delancey Street, Dorothy had been standing in the kitchen of the apartment on Fulton Street reading a piece of paper that she had already read 4 times. The notice had arrived in a standard envelope. No certified mail, no signature required. Just a white envelope with a property management company's return address and a single sheet of paper inside that said, the building had been sold to a development group and all current tenants were required to vacate within 30 days. The 30 days had already started. She had not known the building was for sale. None of the tenants had. The letter was the first anyone had heard of it. Dorothy had lived in that apartment for 4 years and 7 months. She had signed the lease the week before Amara was born. She had chosen it because it was on the 2nd floor, which meant fewer stairs than the 3rd, but less street noise than the 1st. She had chosen it because the bedroom window faced east and got morning light, and she had read somewhere that morning light helped infants sleep better. She did not know if that was true, but she had wanted it to be true, so she had chosen the apartment as if it were, and Amara had slept well in that room, and Dorothy had never checked whether the light was the reason. She had requested an extension twice, the first time by phone. The property management company had a recording that said the office was closed and to leave a message. She left a message. No one returned it. The second time she went in person. She took a bus 40 minutes to an office in a commercial park where a woman behind a desk told her that extensions were not available and that the 30-day window was firm and that there were resources available through the city for tenant in transition. The woman said the word transition the way people say it when they mean something is ending but do not want to be the one who says that. Dorothy went home. She sat at her kitchen table. Amara was at school. The apartment was quiet. She looked at the rooms she had lived in for 4 years and 7 months and began making a list of what she could carry. In the United States, roughly 900,000 eviction cases are filed every year. Single mothers are evicted at nearly twice the rate of the general population. The average time between an eviction filing and physical removal is 16 days. For families with children, the disruption extends far past the move itself. Children who experience eviction before age 6 are significantly more likely to experience food insecurity, developmental delays, and chronic absenteeism in school. The system does not track what happens to most of them after that. Dorothy was not a statistic. She was a woman sitting at a kitchen table making a list. But the numbers existed around her like weather. They had shaped the landscape she was moving through, whether she knew the figures or not. She started with the things she could not leave. Amara's clothes, Amara's inhaler and the 3 refills she had left, her own identification documents, the lease she no longer needed but kept because it had her name on it, and her name on a legal document was one of the few proofs she had that she had been somewhere and had been allowed to stay. Then the things she could not carry. The bookshelf her mother had given her, the year Amara was born, solid oak, too heavy for one person to move. The crib Amara had outgrown 2 years ago, but that Dorothy had kept because it was the first piece of furniture she had ever assembled alone on her knees on the living room floor the night before her due date with an Allen wrench and a set of instructions she had read 3 times. The kitchen table with one short leg that she had fixed with a folded paper napkin 3 years ago, and that had held steady ever since, the napkin still there, still doing its job, still solving the one problem she had been able to solve with what she had. She had sold the car 4 months earlier. Amara's asthma medication cost $87 a month without insurance. Dorothy had lost her insurance when the clinic she worked at reduced her hours below the benefits threshold. She had made the math work for 2 months. The third month she sold the car, a 2004 Civic with 168,000 miles. She got $1,100. It covered 3 months of medication, 2 months of groceries, and the copay for an emergency room visit when Amara had an episode at 2 in the morning in February, and Dorothy carried her 6 blocks to the nearest hospital because she no longer had a car to drive her. She could carry what her hands could hold and what Amara's hands could hold, and one thing more, one large thing. One thing that would not fit in a bag. She kept the mattress. Not because it was valuable, not because it could not be replaced, because it was the surface her daughter slept on every night, and whatever else Dorothy could not give her, she could give her that. One night without a floor. One night with the same softness under her that she had known the night before. One thing that stayed the same when nothing else did. She wrapped it in the fitted sheet from the bed. She tied it with a length of cord she found in the closet. She put Amara's clothes and the inhaler and the documents into a black trash bag because she did not have a suitcase. She put her own clothes into a second bag. Amara carried one. Dorothy carried the other on top of the mattress. They left the apartment at 3:37 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Dorothy locked the door behind her. She put the key in the mailbox as the property management company had instructed. Then she picked up the mattress, and she and her daughter walked out the front door of the building and turned left toward Delancey Street. She did not look back at the building. Looking back was something she had stopped doing. It did not help. It never had. Dorothy Mae Hutchins had not always been the woman carrying a mattress down Delancey Street. 3 years and 4 months before that afternoon, she had been a certified nursing assistant at the Bayview Community Health Clinic on 3rd Street. She worked the day shift, 7 to 3:30. She wore scrubs she ironed the night before and sneakers she replaced every 4 months because the floors at Bayview were hard on your feet, and she had learned that replacing shoes was cheaper than treating the back pain that came from wearing them too long. She earned $19.40 an hour. It was not a lot. It was enough. It was enough because her husband earned more. Wendell James Hutchins was an electrician, IBEW Local 6. He had been a journeyman for 9 years. He worked construction sites across the city, wiring the buildings that were going up faster than the neighborhoods around them could keep pace with. He earned $37 an hour plus benefits, health insurance for all 3 of them, dental, a pension he would never collect. Wendell died on a Thursday morning in March. Scaffolding collapse at a mixed-use development on Brannan Street, 14 stories. The scaffolding on the east face gave way at the connection points on the 9th floor. 3 workers fell. 2 survived with injuries. Wendell did not survive. He was 31 years old. He had dropped Amara off at daycare 40 minutes before the scaffolding came down. The building he died wiring was completed 7 months later. It sold for $82 million. His name was not in the marketing materials. Dorothy took 4 months off work after the funeral, not because she chose to, because Amara stopped speaking. At 3 years old, a child does not have the language to explain what has happened to her world. She simply went silent. She stopped responding to her name. She stopped sleeping through the night. She sat in the middle of whatever room Dorothy placed her in and looked at the door and waited for the sound of a key that was not coming. Dorothy spent those 4 months on the floor beside her daughter. She read to her. She held her. She waited for the silence to break. It broke slowly, in syllables, then words. Then sentences that did not include the word daddy, because Amara had decided in whatever way a 3-year-old decides things that the word itself was the thing that hurt. When Dorothy returned to Bayview, her position had been filled. The clinic had hired a replacement in her 2nd month of absence. They offered her per diem shifts. She took them. But per diem meant no guaranteed hours, no benefits, no insurance. She found a part-time position at a pharmacy on Geary Boulevard, $14.20 an hour, 22 hours a week, no health coverage, no paid leave. The math stopped working immediately. It did not stop working all at once. It stopped working the way a table with one short leg stops working, slowly, then all at once. Researchers call it a cascade of loss. The term describes what happens to a household when the primary earner dies or becomes incapacitated without adequate life insurance or savings to absorb the transition. In the United States, families headed by single mothers who lost a spouse within the preceding 2 years fall below the poverty line at 3 times the rate of the general population. The cascade follows a predictable sequence. Income drops. Insurance lapses. Medical costs shift to out-of-pocket. Savings deplete. Housing becomes unstable. The entire structure that held the family upright loses its load-bearing wall, and everything above it comes down not dramatically, not in a single event, but floor by floor, month by month, bill by bill. Dorothy's cascade took 3 years. Wendell's life insurance policy paid out $42,000. It covered the funeral, 6 months of rent, and the outstanding balance on the car. After that, the math was Dorothy's to solve alone. She solved it by not eating lunch, by cutting Amara's medication from daily to every other day until a bad episode in January forced her back to daily, by selling the car, by choosing every month between rent and groceries and medicine and hoping that she had chosen right. She had not chosen wrong. She had chosen what was possible. The problem was that what was possible kept getting smaller. Spencer was still standing on the sidewalk on Delancey Street. Dorothy and the child had gone inside. The door was still open. He had not moved. He was looking at the house, but he was not seeing the house as it was. He was seeing it as it had been. 27 years ago, the paint on the front door was blue, a deep saturated blue that his mother had chosen from a sample card at the hardware store on Divisadero. She had held the card up to the light for 2 minutes before deciding. Then she bought a quart and painted the door herself on a Saturday morning, while Spencer sat on the front steps eating a peanut butter sandwich and watching her work. She painted it herself. She had always painted it herself. Every 3 years, the same blue, the same brush, the same Saturday morning ritual. The blue was not on the door anymore. The door was the color of bare wood now. But Spencer could see the blue in his mind as clearly as if the paint were still wet. Lorraine Iris Booker bought the house at 4712 Delancey Street in 1989. Spencer was 4. She was 26. She was a nursing aide at St. Francis Memorial, working the overnight shift from 11 to 7 because the overnight differential paid an extra $1.65 an hour and $1.65 an hour over the course of a life. Year was the difference between making the mortgage payment and not. She had no co-signer on the loan. She had no husband. Spencer's father had left before Spencer was born. Not dramatically, not with a fight or a letter or a slammed door. He simply stopped coming, and after enough time had passed, Lorraine stopped expecting him to come, and after more time had passed, she stopped mentioning him at all. She did not erase him. She simply declined to discuss someone who had declined to stay. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened onto a back porch barely large enough for 2 chairs. The foundation had a crack along the east wall that the inspector had noted and Lorraine had decided was manageable. The roof needed patching in 2 places. The hot water heater was 12 years old. She fixed the roof herself. She sealed the foundation crack herself. She replaced the hot water heater with a used one she found through a bulletin board at church. She planted mint and rosemary in the window boxes on the front of the house because they grew in any light and because they made the kitchen smell like something intentional. She put a chair on the front porch, a wooden folding chair she had gotten from the church rummage sale. She sat in it every Sunday evening after her shift, not because she liked sitting outside. The neighborhood was not the kind of place where sitting outside was relaxing. She sat there because Spencer's bedroom window faced the porch, and on Sunday nights before school, he would look out the window, and she wanted him to see her there. She wanted him to look out and know she was not going anywhere. The chair stayed on that porch for 13 years, through every winter, through every summer when the wood expanded and the joints loosened, and she tightened them again with a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. She never replaced it. She maintained it. There was a difference, and the difference mattered to her. though she never explained why. Spencer did not ask. He simply understood the way children understand things. They cannot articulate that the chair being there meant something, and that the something had to do with him. He was 9 years old, the first time he asked why their house was smaller than the houses his friends lived in. He had been to a classmate's birthday party on Steiner Street. The house had 3 stories, a backyard with actual grass, a bedroom for every child. He came home and looked at the kitchen that opened onto the back porch, and the bedroom he shared with a wall that had a crack his mother had patched with spackle she mixed from a YouTube tutorial that did not exist yet. So she had mixed it from the instructions on the bag. "Why is our house small?" Lorraine was at the stove. She did not turn around. She did not stop stirring. She said 7 words. "A home is not the walls. A home is the decision to stay." Then she kept cooking. Spencer did not understand the sentence. He was 9. He filed it in the place children file things they do not understand yet, but suspect they will need later. He would need it 30 years later. Standing on a sidewalk looking at a house his mother had decided to stay in. Lorraine Iris Booker was not a saint. She was not a symbol. She was a woman who worked the overnight shift for 19 years, who slept from 8 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon, who woke up every day to a house she had bought alone and a son she was raising alone and a set of circumstances that required her to be more organized, more disciplined, and more precise about money than anyone she knew who earned twice what she earned. She kept a budget in a composition notebook, every dollar accounted for, every expense written in her handwriting, which was small and even and never crossed anything out. She did not use credit cards. She did not borrow from family because there was no family to borrow from. She paid the mortgage on the 1st of every month. She paid it in person at the bank because she did not trust the mail and because walking into the bank with the check in her hand was the one thing she did each month that made her feel like the house was actually hers. She told Spencer when he was 16 about a tin box under the 3rd step from the bottom of the staircase. She had placed it there the year she bought the house. Inside was a letter she had written to him. She told him this on a Tuesday morning before school, standing in the kitchen in her scrubs, her coat already on for the walk to the bus stop. "When you need to remember where you came from, open it." Spencer did not open it. Not at 16. Not at 17. Not at 18, when he graduated and left for a state college on a scholarship that covered tuition, but not books, and not housing, and not the feeling of being the only person in a lecture hall of 300 who had grown up sharing a wall with a foundation crack. He did not open it because he did not yet need to remember where he came from. He was too busy leaving. Lorraine was diagnosed with lung cancer when Spencer was 22. She had never smoked. The doctors said it was environmental. The overtime she had worked in a hospital with aging ventilation systems for nearly 2 decades had contributed. She did not tell Spencer immediately. She told him 3 weeks after the diagnosis on the phone in the same voice she used for everything. Calm, factual, organized. She told him the stage, the treatment plan, the prognosis. She told him she had already spoken with her supervisor about reducing her shifts. She did not reduce her shifts. She worked the overnight until 2 weeks before she died. The hospital let her go quietly. They sent flowers afterward. Spencer was in New York. He had just started his first job in commercial real estate, an analyst position at a development firm in Midtown. He flew back on a Thursday. She died on a Wednesday. He arrived 13 hours after she stopped breathing. He arrived in time for the silence, but not for the last of her voice. He did not speak at the funeral. 46 people attended. Most of them were from the hospital. Some were neighbors from Delancey Street. Spencer stood in the back row and did not say a word, not because he had nothing to say, because what he had to say was not for a room full of people. It was for a woman who was no longer in the room. He locked the house after the funeral. He put the key in his coat pocket. He walked to the bus stop his mother had walked to every night for 19 years. He caught a bus to the airport. He flew back to New York. He did not sell the house. He did not rent it. He did not return to it. He did not open the tin box under the 3rd step. He locked the door and walked away. That was 19 years ago. The key was still in a drawer in his office. The letter was still under the step. If the step was still there, if the house was still there, the house was still there. He was looking at it right now. Spencer left Delancey Street at 23 with a locked door behind him and a career in front of him that would make him one of the most successful real estate developers in the city within 15 years. He started as an analyst, then an associate, then a project manager, then a principal at a firm that specialized in urban residential development. He was good. He was good because he understood something the other analysts at the firm did not. He understood what a neighborhood was before the investment arrived. He knew what the houses looked like from the inside. He knew how the floors sagged and where the pipes froze, and which blocks had the light that made people want to stay, and which blocks had the noise that made them want to leave. He knew these things because he had lived them. He started his own firm at 34. Voss Capital Development. The model was simple. Buy undervalued residential properties in transitioning neighborhoods. Renovate, reposition, sell, or lease at market rate. The market rate was always higher than the rate the previous tenants had been paying. That was the business. He called it value creation. His accountants called it capital appreciation. The families who had lived in those buildings before the renovations called it something else, but nobody asked them what they called it. In the United States, gentrification displaces an estimated 430,000 households per year. The process does not require malice. It requires capital market demand and a gap between what a property is currently worth and what it could be worth to a different population at a different income level. The developer does not have to intend to displace anyone. The displacement happens inside the math. Spencer had developed 14 projects in 11 years. 912 residential units across 6 neighborhoods. Each project followed the same pattern. Acquire, renovate, price at market. The existing residents either absorbed the increase or left. Most left. The buildings filled again with people who could afford the new rate. The neighborhoods changed. The grocery stores changed. The names on the mailboxes changed. The people who had been there before became people who used to be there, and the people who arrived after did not know them and did not ask about them. Spencer did not think of himself as someone who displaced families. He thought of himself as someone who created value in underperforming markets. The language insulated him, the way the tinted glass of his car insulated him from the sidewalk. It was not dishonest. It was simply a different resolution. At the resolution he operated at, the families were not visible. At the resolution Dorothy lived at, they were the only thing that was. He donated, generously, a foundation in his mother's name that funded scholarships for first-generation college students, annual contributions to 3 homeless shelters, a standing pledge to a housing advocacy nonprofit that sent him a thank you letter every December that he read and filed. He donated from a distance. He wrote checks in offices. He attended galas in ballrooms. He never went back to the streets where the money came from. He never walked through the neighborhoods his company had transformed. He never stood on a sidewalk and looked at the door of a building his firm had purchased and wondered who had lived behind it before the renovation began. Until today. Today he was standing on Delancey Street, looking at a house he had not renovated, had not sold, had not returned to, a house that had simply waited the way houses do when no one is maintaining them, and no one is living in them, and no one is making the decision to stay. Dorothy had carried the mattress through the front door and set it down in the center of the living room floor. She stood there and looked at what she had bought with everything she had left. $2,800. That was the price at the tax lien auction. She had found the listing through a program at the public library, a free workshop on homeownership resources for low-income residents that she had attended on a Saturday morning while Amara sat in the children's section looking at picture books. The workshop was 2 hours. Most of it did not apply to her. She did not qualify for any of the conventional programs. Her income was too low for a mortgage. Her credit had been damaged by a medical bill she had not been able to pay in time. She did not have a cosigner. But the tax lien section of the presentation mentioned that abandoned properties with unpaid taxes could be purchased at auction for the amount of the tax debt. The amounts were small, hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands. The properties were almost always in poor condition. Many were uninhabitable, Some were structurally compromised. The presenter said the word risk 4 times in 2 minutes. Dorothy went home and searched the city's upcoming auction list. She found 7 properties. She could not afford 6 of them. She could afford one. 4,712. Delancey Street. Listed at $2,800 for 9 years of unpaid property taxes. She had not seen the house. She had not visited the neighborhood. She did not know the condition of the roof, or the foundation, or the plumbing, or the wiring. She knew only that it had an address and a deed that could become hers. She paid in cash. 57 $20 bills she had been saving in an envelope inside her pillowcase for 2 years. She received the deed by mail 3 weeks later. She held it in her hands and read her name on it and read the address on it and stood in her apartment on Fulton Street and understood that she owned something. That for the first time since Wendell died, she had a place she could not be asked to leave. She had never seen the inside until today. The living room was dark. The windows were intact but so layered with dust and grime that the afternoon light came through them as a gray wash, turning everything inside the color of old newspaper. The floor was hardwood, warped in places, buckled near the back wall where water had come in from somewhere above, but solid under her feet. She could feel that, solid in the way old floors are when they were laid by someone who knew what they were doing. The walls. She looked at the walls. There were layers of paint. She could see them where the surface had chipped and peeled. Blue underneath, then cream, then a pale yellow, then blue again. Someone had painted this room multiple times across many years, and at least twice they had chosen the same blue, which meant the blue was not an accident. It was a preference. It was someone saying, this is the color this room is supposed to be, and I am going to keep making it that color for as long as I am here. Dorothy did not know who had painted these walls. She did not know the woman who had chosen the blue, or the boy who had watched her from the front steps, or the chair that had sat on the porch for 13 years. But she stood in the living room with her mattress on the floor, and her daughter in the doorway, and the deed in her coat pocket, and she understood something without knowing the story behind it. Someone had loved this house. Someone had stayed. The house was still standing. Amara walked in. She set the trash bag down beside the mattress. She looked up at the ceiling, which had a water stain shaped like nothing in particular, and then she looked at her mother. Is this ours? Dorothy nodded. Amara looked at the room for another moment. Then she sat down on the mattress. She pulled her knees to her chest. She did not complain about the dust or the dark or the smell of a house that had been closed for almost 2 decades. She sat on the mattress, which was the same mattress she had slept on last night in a different building, in a different life. And she accepted that this was where the mattress lived now, and therefore where she lived now. Dorothy sat down beside her. She put her arm around her daughter. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say that the mattress and the roof and the walls were not already saying. They were inside. The door was open. The house was still standing. Spencer stood on the sidewalk outside 4,712 Delancey Street with his hands in his coat pockets, and did not go in. The front door was open. He could hear sounds from inside, footsteps on hardwood, the particular creak of the second floorboard past the entryway, the one his mother had never fixed because she said it was the house saying hello. He had not heard that sound in 19 years. He heard it now, made by a stranger's feet, and the sound went through him the way a frequency goes through glass, not breaking it, vibrating it until the structure remembers what it is made of. He looked at the porch. The railing on the left side was gone. The concrete steps had the same crack down the center he had jumped over as a child because his mother told him cracks were bad luck, and he had believed her until he was 11 and stopped believing her about small things and started believing her about large ones. The chair was gone. The wooden folding chair she had sat in every Sunday night for 13 years. But the porch floor where it had stood still showed the marks. 2 shallow impressions in the wood worn smooth by years of weight and weather, and the repetition of a woman sitting in the same place at the same time for the same reason. The marks were still there. The woman was not. He had built 14 residential developments in 11 years, 912 units. He had never once built anything he could not sell. Every structure he had created had a price, a buyer, a closing date, and a return on investment calculated to the second decimal. He was standing in front of the one building he had never been able to let go of. And he had let go of it anyway, not by selling it, by leaving it, which was worse. Selling is a transaction. Leaving is a decision not to care for something that needs care, and calling the decision something else so you do not have to feel it. He could see through the open door into the hallway. The wallpaper his mother had hung was peeling at the seams. The light fixture above the staircase was dark. The stairs were still there. The third step from the bottom was still there. The tin box was still under it. Or it was not. He did not know. He had not checked in 19 years. He could hear the woman moving through the rooms. He could hear the child somewhere above on the second floor, in the room that had been his. He stood on the sidewalk and listened to people living in his mother's house and did not move. He was a man who made decisions for a living. He assessed. He calculated. He acted. He was standing on a sidewalk, unable to do any of those things. The house did not require his money. It did not require his expertise. It required something he had not used in 19 years and was not certain he still had. It required him to walk through a door. Dorothy was in the kitchen when she heard the child's footsteps go upstairs. She did not stop her. The house was small enough that she could hear Amara from any room, and Amara had always been careful on stairs. She had learned to be careful the way she had learned everything else in the last 3 years, by necessity, by repetition, by watching her mother and doing what her mother did without being told. Dorothy opened the kitchen cabinets. Empty. She opened the drawer beside the stove. Inside was a single matchbook from a restaurant she did not recognize. She opened the cabinet under the sink. A bottle of cleaning solution dried out the label, faded past reading. Someone had left it. 19 years ago, someone had closed this kitchen and walked away and left a bottle of cleaning solution under the sink as if they might come back for it. She walked into the hallway. She looked at the staircase. The banister was loose on the left side. The wallpaper had pulled away from the wall in long curling strips that hung like something waiting to be finished or removed. She put her hand on the wall where the wallpaper had peeled and felt the plaster underneath. Cool, solid, old in the way that old things are when they were made by people who expected them to last. She noticed the door frame at the bottom of the stairs. There were marks on it, small horizontal lines drawn in pencil, each with a notation beside it. She leaned closer. The pencil had faded, but was still legible. The marks measured height. A child's height, recorded at intervals across what looked like many years. The lowest mark said 4. The highest said 17. Between them, 13 years of a child growing up inside this house, measured against this doorframe recorded by someone who had been paying attention. Dorothy touched the lowest mark with her finger. She did not know whose child this was. She did not know who had held the pencil or who had stood with their back against the frame while the line was drawn. But she knew what the marks meant. They meant someone had been here long enough to watch a child grow. They meant someone had cared enough to keep track. She found a photograph behind the cabinet in the hallway. It had fallen there or been left there, wedged between the cabinet back and the wall in the narrow gap where things go and are forgotten. She pulled it out carefully. The edges were soft with age. A woman in a nursing uniform sitting on the front porch steps. She was not posing. She was looking at something to her left off camera and smiling. Not a large smile. The smile of someone who is tired but not unhappy. Behind her, the front door of the house was open. The door was painted blue. Dorothy looked at the photograph for a long time. She did not know this woman, but she recognized something in the way she sat on those steps. The posture of someone who had come home from a long shift and had sat down in the first place available and was not going to get up for a while. She set the photograph on the cabinet. She did not put it away. She left it out where she could see it. She went upstairs. The second floor had 2 rooms and a bathroom. The bathroom had a cracked mirror and a tub with a rust stain the shape of a river delta. The first room was small and empty. The second room was slightly larger with a window that faced the street. Mama, there is stars on the ceiling. Amara was lying on her back on the floor of the second room looking up. Dorothy looked up. On the ceiling, glow-in-the-dark stars. Dozens of them, arranged not randomly but in patterns. Clusters that looked deliberate. Constellations may be placed by someone who knew where the stars were supposed to go. The adhesive had yellowed. Some of the stars had lost their glow. A few had fallen and were lying on the floor like small plastic promises that had not quite held. But most of them were still up there, still stuck, still arranged in the shapes someone had chosen for them years ago. In the dark, they would still glow, faintly, enough. Dorothy stood in the doorway of the room that had been Spencer's and looked at the stars his mother had put on the ceiling when he was young enough to believe that the ceiling was the sky and the sky was something you could bring inside if you loved someone enough to try. She did not know any of this. She did not know about Lorraine or Spencer or the Sunday night chair or the tin box under the third step. She just knew that someone had looked up at this ceiling and decided a child sleeping here deserved stars. "This is your room," Dorothy said. Amara looked at her. "Mine, yours." Amara looked back up at the ceiling. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. The stars were enough. Spencer heard voices from inside the house. Not the words, just the sound. A woman's voice, and then a child's voice, and then silence. The kind of silence that comes after something has been decided. He stepped onto the porch. His shoes on the wood made a sound he had not heard since he was 18 years old. He stopped at the open door. He could see the hallway, the peeling wallpaper, the staircase, the doorframe with the pencil marks he had forgotten existed, until this moment, when the sight of them hit him in the center of his chest, like something he had swallowed years ago and never fully digested. He knocked on the frame of the open door. 2 knocks, not loud, not tentative. The knocks of a man who did not know what he was doing here, but had decided to find out. Dorothy came down the stairs. She saw him in the doorway. A man in a dark suit standing on the porch of her house. Her house. She had owned it for 5 weeks. She had been inside it for less than an hour, but it was hers. And the man standing in the doorway was not invited, and every experience she had had in the last 3 years with men in suits had ended with her losing something. She stopped on the second to last step. She did not come closer. She held the banister with one hand. Amara was behind her on the landing, looking down through the railing. "I grew up in this house." Dorothy looked at him, then at the hallway around her, at the pencil marks on the doorframe, at the photograph she had left on the cabinet. She looked back at him. She did not say anything. She was calculating, not numbers, risk. What this man wanted, whether what he wanted would cost her the only thing she had just gained. "I am not here to take it back," he said. She watched his eyes the way she had learned to watch people's eyes when they told her things she needed to verify before believing. His eyes were not on her. They were on the hallway behind her, on the wallpaper, on the stairs, on something she could not see because it was not in the house anymore. It was in his memory, and his memory was the only place it still existed. "Then why are you here?" He did not have an answer. Not because he did not know, because the answer required him to admit something he had been running from for 19 years. That he had left this house not because he did not need it, but because he needed it too much. That locking the door had been easier than opening it. That every building he had built since had been an attempt to replace the one he could not walk into. He looked past her. Into the living room. He saw the mattress on the floor. He saw the black trash bag beside it. He saw the dust and the water stains and the bare walls and the 19 years of absence that had turned his mother's home into something barely habitable. And on the floor, in the center of it all, a mattress. A single mattress wrapped in a fitted sheet carried 11 blocks on the back of a woman who had nothing else to bring. He remembered. Not gradually, not in pieces, all at once, the way a room becomes visible when someone turns on a light. His mother had moved into this house when he was 4 years old. She had bought it with a loan she would spend 15 years paying off. She had no furniture. She had no savings left after the down payment. She had a son and a set of keys, and nothing else. The first night, they slept on a mattress on the living room floor, a donated mattress from the church on Fillmore Street. His mother had carried it 3 blocks from the church to the house by herself because she did not have a car and could not afford a delivery and would not ask for help because asking for help felt too much like admitting she could not do. This alone, and admitting that felt too much like proving everyone who doubted her right. Spencer did not remember that night. He was 4. The memory did not belong to him. It belonged to his mother. She had told him about it once when he was 15, sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning. She told it the way she told everything, simply, without drama, without asking for sympathy. We slept on a mattress on the floor the first night. I carried it from the church. You fell asleep before I finished making the bed. I lay there next to you and listened to the house and decided we were going to be fine. He had forgotten that story. He had filed it in the place where you put things your mother tells you that you do not fully understand yet. He had not thought about it since. Not once in 27 years. He thought about it now, standing in the doorway of his mother's house, looking at a mattress on the living room floor. A different mattress, a different woman, a different child, but the floor was the same floor. And the decision was the same decision, the decision to stay. He remembered. Dorothy's story is not unusual. It is not even rare. It is the most common version of poverty in America. The kind that happens not because someone made a bad decision, but because the margin of safety was so thin that one ordinary tragedy was enough to collapse it. In the United States, more than 2 million children live in households headed by a single mother who earns below the federal poverty line. For families where the mother became the sole parent, through the death of a spouse, the first 24 months are the most financially destructive. The average household income drops by 41%. Health insurance coverage lapses in nearly half of cases within the first year. 1 in 3 of these families will experience housing instability, meaning they will move involuntarily, double up with relatives, stay in shelters, or lose their housing entirely within 2 years of the spouse's death. The system was not designed for Dorothy. It was not designed to catch a woman who was working, who was paying rent, who was managing her daughter's asthma medication month by month, who was doing everything she was supposed to do within the constraints she had been given. The system was designed to process people who had already fallen, not to prevent the fall. By the time the system recognized Dorothy, she was already carrying a mattress. Tax lien auctions exist in the space between abandonment and opportunity. When a property owner stops paying taxes, the local government accumulates the unpaid balance as a lien against the property. After a statutory period, the lien is offered for sale at public auction. The buyer does not purchase the house directly. The buyer purchases the debt. In most jurisdictions, the original owner has a redemption period to pay the debt and reclaim the property. If the owner does not redeem, the buyer can petition for the deed. Dorothy did not know this process when she attended the library workshop. She learned it the way she learned everything after Wendell died, quickly, out of necessity, without the luxury of making a mistake. The house at 4712 Delancey Street had been in tax delinquency for 9 years. The owner of record was listed as Lorraine Iris Booker, deceased. No estate had been probated. No heir had filed a claim. The property had simply sat in the city's records, accumulating taxes. No one was paying, deteriorating in a way. No one was preventing, waiting in a way. No one was noticing. Spencer had the resources to pay the taxes. He had the resources to pay them 100 times over. He had chosen not to. Not out of neglect exactly. Out of the particular kind of avoidance that wealthy people can afford and poor people cannot. He had the money to ignore the house. Dorothy did not have the money to ignore the opportunity. She paid $2,800. He could have paid it with the change in his coat pocket. This is not a story about one woman and one house. This is a story about what happens when the distance between those who have and those who need becomes so vast that an abandoned house sits empty for nearly 2 decades in a city where families sleep in cars. It is a story about a system that allowed a 4-year-old's home to fall into ruin while the child who grew up in it built luxury apartments 6 miles away. It is a story about proximity and blindness, and the lie we tell ourselves that poverty happens somewhere else to someone else for reasons that have nothing to do with us. Dorothy did not know Spencer. Spencer did not know Dorothy, but they were standing in the same house, on the same floor, separated by nothing but a doorway and everything a doorway can mean. Amara Hutchins was 6 years old. She had lived in 4 apartments in 3 years. She had attended 2 different schools and 1 daycare that closed. She had slept in a car for 2 nights the week before they moved into the house on Delancey Street. She did not talk about any of this. Not because she had been told not to, because she had learned the way children learn the things no one teaches them, that talking about the hard parts did not make them stop. She had opened the black trash bag and was arranging its contents on the floor beside the mattress. She folded each piece of clothing separately, small squares, neat edges, the shirts in one stack, the pants in another, the socks paired and rolled. She was 6. 6-year-olds do not fold clothes this way. 6-year-olds throw clothes into piles and lose socks between couch cushions and leave shirts inside out on the bathroom floor. Amara folded because Amara had learned that everything she owned had to be ready to go into a bag at any time. She did not hang things in closets. She did not spread out across a room. She did not put posters on walls or leave shoes by the door or place a toothbrush in a holder as if the holder would still be there tomorrow. She kept her footprint small. She kept her belongings contained. She kept herself the way people keep things they expect to move again soon. Children who experience repeated housing instability develop this pattern before anyone names it for them. They learn not to settle, not to claim space, not to leave evidence of themselves in a place that might not be theirs next month. It is not neatness. It is not discipline. It is the behavioral signature of a child who has been taught by circumstance that attachment to a space is a risk she cannot afford. Amara finished folding. She placed the stacks against the wall. She looked at the room. Then she looked at Spencer, who was still standing near the doorway. She had not spoken to him. She had been watching him the way she watched all unfamiliar adults. Not with fear, not with warmth. With the steady, unblinking attention of someone who has learned to read a room before the room reads her. "Did you live here when you were little?" Spencer looked at her. He nodded. Amara looked at the walls. At the layers of paint Dorothy had noticed earlier. The blue underneath. The cream. The yellow. The blue again. "Did your mom paint the walls too?" Spencer did not answer immediately. The question was simple. A child's question. But it landed in the place where his memory of his mother was stored, and the door to that place had been closed for 19 years, and a 6-year-old had just opened it with 7 words. "She did," he said. Amara nodded once. She looked back at the wall. She seemed satisfied with this answer, as if it confirmed something she had already decided. Then she went back to her folding. Dorothy was watching from the staircase. She did not intervene. She did not explain Amara to Spencer or Spencer to Amara. She just watched her daughter ask a stranger the exact question that connected every thread in the house, and she understood without knowing the full story that the answer mattered more than the man who gave it. Spencer left that evening. He walked through the front door onto the porch and stopped. He turned back. "The 3rd step from the bottom is loose," he said. "There is a tin box underneath it. It belongs to me. I will come back for it." Dorothy looked at him from inside the hallway. She did not ask what was in the box. She did not ask when he would come back. She just nodded once and watched him walk down the porch steps and onto the sidewalk where his car was still waiting. Spencer got into the back seat. The driver pulled away from the curb. The house receded in the rear window. The porch, the open door, the woman standing in the hallway of his mother's house as if she belonged there, as if the house had been waiting for exactly this. For someone who would show up with nothing except a mattress and a child and the decision to stay. He did not speak for the first 11 minutes of the drive. He sat with his hands on his knees and looked out the window at the city. He had spent 20 years reshaping from the inside of boardrooms and did not recognize any of it from this angle, not because it was unfamiliar. Because he was seeing it differently. He was seeing it the way his mother had seen it, from the ground, from the level of someone who walked because they could not afford to drive, from the height of someone carrying something heavy with no one offering to help. He thought about his mother for the first time in 19 years, without the thought arriving as pain. It arrived as a question. What would she want him to do with the house? He did not need to think about the answer. The answer had been there since the moment he saw the mattress on the living room floor. He had been avoiding the answer the way he had been avoiding the house. The way he had been avoiding the tin box. The way he had been avoiding everything that required him to stop being the man he had become and remember the boy he had been. His mother would not have wanted the house to sit empty. His mother would not have wanted the walls she painted to peel. His mother would not have wanted the chair on the porch to rot, and the stars on the ceiling to fade, and the pencil marks on the doorframe to be the only proof that someone had once grown up loved inside those rooms. She would have wanted someone in the house. She would have wanted the house to do what it had always done. Hold someone, keep someone, be the place where someone decided to stay. This is not charity. This is not generosity. This is not the impulse of a wealthy man moved by the sight of poverty. This is a man paying a debt he did not know he owed until he saw a mattress on a floor he used to sleep on. This is a correction. There is a difference. Spencer called his office the next morning. He told his assistant to find a residential contractor licensed for structural renovation. He told her the address. He told her the scope: full restoration, foundation to roof, electrical, plumbing, walls, floors. Everything that 19 years of vacancy had taken from the house he would put back. He did not call Dorothy first. He did not ask permission. He sent the contractor to the address on a Thursday morning with instructions to assess the scope and begin within the week. Dorothy met the contractor at the door. She listened to what he told her. She looked at the clipboard in his hands. She looked at the truck parked at the curb with the company name on the side. Then she called Spencer. She had his number because he had left a card on the cabinet beside the photograph of his mother. She had not expected to use it. She used it now. I am not going to stand outside and watch someone fix my house for me. If I cannot do the work myself, it is not mine. Spencer was quiet on the other end. Not because he was surprised, because he had heard those words before. Not the exact words, the exact principle. His mother had said it differently. His mother had said, if I did not earn it, it does not belong to me. Different words. Same woman. Different decade. Same kitchen. He told the contractor Dorothy would be working alongside the crew. The contractor asked if she had experience. Spencer said she would learn. She learned. She learned to sand floors with a belt sander on the first weekend. She learned to strip wallpaper with a steamer on the second. She learned to tape and mud drywall joints on the third. And her lines were not clean the first day or the second, but by the fourth, they were cleaner than the contractor's apprentice, and the apprentice stopped offering to fix them for hair. Amara helped. She wiped baseboards with a damp cloth. She sorted screws into jars by size. She swept sawdust from the kitchen floor with a broom that was taller than she was. She did these things without being asked. She did them the way she did everything, quietly, precisely, as if the house might leave if she did not take care of it. Spencer came on Saturdays. He drove himself. No driver, no suit. He wore jeans he had bought at a hardware store because he did not own jeans and had not owned jeans since college. He sanded. He scraped. He replaced a door handle on the back door, and it took him 40 minutes because he had not held a screwdriver for anything other than tightening a cabinet hinge in his office in 15 years. He was not good at it, but he did it. There was something in the doing that he had forgotten. The feeling of your hands changing a surface. The feeling of a house becoming different under your effort. He had built 912 units through contracts and permits and capital allocation. He had not physically built anything since he helped his mother patch the foundation crack when he was 14. On the third Saturday, the contractor's crew reached the staircase. They pulled the old treads to replace the joists underneath. The third step from the bottom came apart in 2 pieces. Underneath, wedged in the framing between the stringer and the subfloor, was a tin box. The foreman brought it to Spencer. It was the size of a man's hand. Blue tin scratched, dented at one corner. The lid was tight. Spencer held it. He did not open it. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put it in his coat pocket. The coat was hanging on a nail by the front door. The box went into the left pocket. It stayed there. Dorothy painted the living room on a Tuesday night after Amara fell asleep on the mattress in the upstairs room. She had chosen a color from the hardware store on Divisadero. Not blue, a warm green, the color of the mint that used to grow in the window boxes, though she did not know that. She painted by hand, one wall at a time. The roller left tracks she smoothed with a second pass. The house was quiet. The only sound was the wet pull of the roller on plaster and the occasional creak of the floor under her bare feet. She painted the way Lorraine had painted. At night, alone, after her child was asleep, in the same house, with the same quiet, with the same quality of attention that comes from a woman making a space hers by putting her hands on every surface of it, Dorothy did not know she was repeating someone else's ritual. She did not know that 30 years ago in this exact room, at this exact hour, another woman had stood with a roller and a can of paint and the same silence and the same purpose. Spencer knew. He had come in through the back door to drop off a box of hardware the contractor had ordered. He stopped at the bottom of the staircase. He looked into the living room. He saw Dorothy painting the wall. Green, not blue. Different color. Same motion, same hour, same house. He stood there for a moment. He did not say anything. He set the box of hardware down on the hallway floor. He went back out the way he came in. He sat on the back porch steps and looked at the yard his mother had never gotten around to planting and breathed. The tin box was still in his coat pocket. He had not opened it. He was not ready. But he was closer than he had been yesterday. That was enough for now. Hattie Pearl Washington had lived at 4710 Delancey Street for 49 years. She had moved in when she was 25. She was 74 now. She had outlived 2 husbands, 1 daughter, and most of the neighborhood she had known when she arrived. The block had changed around her in ways that were too slow to notice at any single moment and too total to ignore across the decades. Families left. Buildings were sold. Some were renovated. Some were demolished. Some just sat the way the house next door had sat for 19 years, waiting for something no one came back to give it. Hattie had known Lorraine Booker. Not well. Not the way close friends know each other. The way neighbors know each other. Through proximity. Through repetition. Through the small exchanges that happen when 2 women live 18 feet apart and raise children at the same time, in the same place, with the same set of constraints, and the same refusal to let those constraints define them. She had watched Lorraine paint the front door on Saturday mornings. She had heard Spencer playing in the back porch when he was small. She had seen Lorraine walk to the bus stop every night at 10:30 in her white nursing shoes and return every morning at 7:15 and sit on the porch for 10 minutes before going inside, not because she was resting, but because she wanted the house to see her before she entered it. As if the house needed to know she was home. Hattie saw the contractor's truck on the first Thursday. She watched from her front window. She did not come out. On the second week, she saw Dorothy carrying supplies from the truck to the front door. She saw the child sweeping the porch. She saw a man in jeans she did not recognize sanding the window frames on the second floor. On the third Saturday, she came out. She walked the 18 feet between her front door and the property line of 4712. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at Dorothy, who was on her knees scrubbing the porch boards with a wire brush. "You, the new owner, Dorothy," looked up. She nodded. Hattie looked at the house, at the new porch railing, at the windows reglazed and cleaned for the first time in almost 2 decades, at the front door which someone had sanded down to bare wood but not yet painted. "I knew the woman who lived here before," Hattie said. Lorraine. Worked nights at St. Francis. Raised her boy in this house, all by herself. She put that porch together with her own hands. She sat in a chair, right where you are kneeling now, every Sunday, rain or shine. Dorothy set down the brush. She said if she was sitting there, her boy would always know where to find her. Dorothy looked at the porch boards, at the 2 impressions in the wood that she had noticed on her first day, but had not understood. Now, she understood. They were not damage. They were evidence. 13 years of a woman sitting in the same place, making herself visible, making herself permanent. In neighborhoods like Delancey Street, history is not kept in archives. It is kept in people. In women like Hattie, who have lived long enough to remember what the buildings used to hold, community memory is the term researchers use. It means the knowledge that exists between neighbors passed through conversation and presence, and the simple act of staying in a place long enough to witness what happens there. For single mothers, this kind of memory matters. Not financially. Socially. The knowledge that someone on the block knows your name, that someone noticed when you came home late, that someone would knock on your door if your lights did not come on at the usual time. This is not a program. It cannot be funded. It is the residue of people staying in one place and paying attention. Hattie had paid attention to Lorraine for 13 years. Now she was paying attention to Dorothy, not because she had been asked to, because that was what neighbors did. Because that was the only thing left that no system could replace, and no algorithm could replicate, and no building renovation could install. Dorothy stood up. She looked at Hattie. "Would you like to come inside?" Hattie looked at the front door. The door Lorraine had painted blue. The door that was bare wood, now waiting for someone to choose its next color. She had not been inside this house since Lorraine's funeral. She had stood on this porch and knocked on this door 100 times, but she had not been past the threshold since the day she came to pay her respects, and the house was already empty and the boy was already gone. She went inside. She walked through the hallway. She saw the new paint on the living room walls. She saw the mattress on the floor. She saw the photograph of Lorraine that Dorothy had set on the cabinet and kept there through the entire renovation untouched, uncovered the one thing in the house that had not been moved. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at Dorothy. "She would have liked you," Hattie said. "She would have liked you a whole lot." The house was finished on a Saturday in October. The walls were painted. The floors were sanded and sealed. The roof was patched, and the plumbing ran clean, and the electrical passed inspection on the first try. The front door was blue. Dorothy had chosen the color without knowing it had been blue before. She had picked it from the same hardware store on Divisadero from a sample card she held up to the light for a long time before deciding. Spencer saw the color when he arrived that morning. He did not say anything. He did not need to. That evening, after the last of the contractor's tools had been loaded into the truck and the crew had left, Spencer came back. He parked on the street. He walked up the porch steps. The new chair was there. A wooden folding chair Dorothy had found at a second-hand shop on Fillmore Street and placed in the exact spot where the wear marks had been. She had not known the history. She had just thought a porch needed a chair. Spencer sat down in it. He reached into his coat pocket and took out the tin box. He held it in both hands. He had been carrying it for 5 weeks. 5 weeks in his coat pocket through meetings and phone calls and Saturday mornings with a belt sander, and Tuesday nights watching a woman paint walls in the dark. He had carried it the way his mother had carried it, close, waiting for the right time. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice, written in his mother's handwriting. The handwriting was small and even and did not cross anything out. The paper had yellowed, the edges were soft, but the ink was still clear. She had written his name at the top. Just the name. No dear, no my son. Just Spencer. She wrote about the house. She wrote about the day she bought it. About the loan she was not sure she could pay. About carrying a mattress from the church on Fillmore Street and laying it on the living room floor and watching her son fall asleep before she had finished making the bed. She wrote about lying beside him in the dark and listening to the house settle around them and deciding in that silence that this was going to work. She wrote about the paint, the blue she had chosen, the Saturday mornings, the window boxes, the chair on the porch, and why it mattered, and why she would never explain why it mattered, because some things you do not explain. You just do them, and hope the person they are for understands eventually. She wrote one final line. This house was never about the walls. It was about you knowing you had somewhere to come back to. If you are reading this, you came back. That is all I ever needed. Spencer read the letter. He folded it along the original creases. He put it back in the tin box. He closed the lid. He did not cry. He sat in the chair on the porch of his mother's house and looked through the open front door into the hallway. Dorothy was upstairs. He could hear her voice. She was reading to Amara. The words were too faint to make out, but the rhythm was steady, the cadence of a mother reading a bedtime story in a house that belonged to her. Amara's room still had the stars on the ceiling. The old ones had been taken down during the renovation. Amara had chosen new ones. She placed them herself, standing on her bed, pressing each one into the plaster with both hands, not in the patterns Lorraine had chosen. In new ones, her own constellations, her own sky. The mattress was still in the room. Dorothy had bought a bed frame. Amara slept on the frame most nights, but some nights she asked to sleep on the mattress. Dorothy never asked why. She knew. The mattress was the thing that had stayed the same through everything. It was the last surface from the life before. It was not comfortable. It was not necessary, but it was hers. And sometimes you hold on to things not because you need them, but because they are proof that you survived needing them. Spencer sat on the porch. The street was quiet. The light in Amara's room was on. The stars on the ceiling were glowing. The letter was in the box. The box was in his hands. His mother had written it 26 years ago. She had placed it under the third step from the bottom and waited. She had waited for him to need it. She had waited for him to come back. He came back. The house held. Spencer Booker Voss built towers. 14 developments, 912 units. Glass and steel and capital appreciation and returns calculated to the second decimal. The city gave him awards. Magazines wrote profiles. His name was on buildings that people drove past every day and recognized. Dorothy Mae Hutchins carried a mattress. 11 blocks, 62 pounds, wrapped in a fitted sheet. On a Tuesday afternoon in a city that did not slow down for her, nobody wrote about it. Nobody photographed it. Nobody gave her an award for carrying everything she had left on her back through streets that had been redesigned to serve people who would never have to carry anything. One of them built towers. The other carried a mattress. The city noticed the towers. Nobody noticed the mattress. Think about what that says about what we choose to see. The cruelest thing about people like Dorothy is not what they endure. It is how invisible the endurance is. She carried that mattress past hundreds of cars. Not one of them stopped. She walked 11 blocks in broad daylight, and not a single person asked if she needed help. Not because people are cruel. Because people have been trained to look past certain kinds of struggle, the same way they have been trained to look past certain kinds of buildings in certain kinds of neighborhoods. There is a house somewhere near you right now that someone is trying to turn into a home. You have driven past it. You have not slowed down. Not because you do not care, because slowing down requires seeing, and seeing requires acknowledging that the distance between your life and that house is smaller than you think. There is someone in your life right now carrying something heavy alone, not a mattress, something heavier, something invisible, and they are not asking for help, not because they do not need it, because they stopped expecting it. If this story made you think about that person, send it to them. If it made you uncomfortable about how easily we look past people, that discomfort is useful. Sit with it. Let it change what you notice tomorrow. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. See you in the next one. This is a fictional story. The characters' names and events are entirely imagined. None of this happened, but all of it is happening. Right now, in every city in this country. I wrote this story because I grew up 3 blocks from a house that sat empty for 11 years while a family I knew slept in a station wagon for 2 weeks before finding a shelter that would take all 4 of them. The house and the family existed in the same zip code. One was a tax write-off. The other was a statistic. Neither had to be. Fiction does not fix housing policy. It does not fund shelters or change zoning laws or lower the cost of rent, but it can do something data cannot. It can make you see a mattress on a sidewalk and wonder who is carrying it and where they are going and what it costs them to keep walking. If you want to do more than wonder, organizations like Habitat for Humanity, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, and your local community land trusts are doing the structural work that stories can only point toward. Look them up. Show up, carry something. Stories do not change policy, but they change how we see the people policy is supposed to protect. And that is where change begins.